The internationally respected Whitaker Wellness Institute proudly presents our educational video library created to help you continue on your path to optimum health. In this module, we feature the spiritual nature of healing with Donald L. Jolly, PhD.
Greetings to all of you, and thank you for being here for this presentation of the spiritual nature of healing. Today we're going to talk about things that transcend the physical, things that are out of the box, so to speak. I think it's very exciting and important that we do that once in a while so we don't lose the reality of the spiritual, the things that exist beyond, the powers that we have that we don't really focus in on every day. So today we're going to talk about the health benefits of spiritual belief and practice. I admire Albert Einstein and studied his life extensively. I have a lot of quotes from Einstein. I love them. They're very inspiring, they're very insightful, very deep. Many people thought Einstein was an atheist and others thought he was an agnostic. He was neither. Einstein was an incredible man. He had an incredible mind, very deep spiritual consciousness. This quote, "Science without religion is lame, and religion without science is blind," is important for all of us because of the balanced life we need to live if we're going to experience life to the fullest. I wanted to share this with you before we begin. I think it's important that we take a look at something we call prayer. Do we know what prayer is? Let's take a look at the root of prayer for our American culture. The word prayer that we use comes from, and the concept of prayer comes from the Latin. The word precarius is a noun, and it means that which is obtained by prayer, by begging, by negotiating, by whatever means that you want to get it. And the verb to pray, to entreat, to negotiate, to ask for is precari. And most of us use these words and these concepts when we look at prayer. I prefer, however, the ancient Hebrew context of prayer as it passed to Christianity through the Aramaic language. And the word for prayer is salah. And salah, if you translated it 2,000 years ago or today, means the same thing. It literally means to set a trap. Well, isn't that a perfectly ridiculous definition for prayer? No, it's not. If you understand the idiomatic depth, the real meaning of the word. To set a trap. What is a trap? A trap is something that gathers things. The trap in our society and culture today that we're most used to is a satellite dish. A satellite dish, always open to receiving the signal from the satellite. And in fact, the ancient concept of prayer was that we need to be open to get the signal from God. And we have to give some time to assimilate. Once we put things out there, we have to be open to receiving them. So I want you to be aware of that. It's a very important thing to think about. There are several types of prayer. The common types of prayer that we're used to, petitionary prayer. That's when I get in there and I focus hard and I ask for what I want. I tune in to the universe. I plug in so that I can attract what it is I'm after. The other type of prayer is intercessory prayer, where I plug in and tune in for you, for someone else, for a group of people, for a certain situation. It's when I pray, when I put my energy, my mental and spiritual energy out there to attract something for someone else. And then there's the prayer of gratitude and adoration, which I think is the most powerful form of prayer because gratitude is not only appreciated by somebody you give it to, including God, including Creator, but it's something that fortifies our own being. It gives us a positive sense, a very powerful sense. Imagine yourself a parent, which many of you are, and your 19 or 20-year-old child, boy or girl, comes to you one evening and says, "Mom, Dad, I want to tell you I love you. I want to tell you how grateful I am for everything you've done for me." And Mom, as he looks into your eyes or she looks into your eyes, "Thank you. Thank you for keeping me in your body for 9 months, for helping to give me life, for nurturing that life, for going through all the inconveniences and going through the birth process. Thank you for all the diapers you changed. Thank you for everything. And Dad, thank you for helping. And thank you for working, Dad, and making money so that you could support Mom and me. Thank you for all you gave me through the years that I grew up and all the struggles and trials and problems that I gave you. I want you to know that I am deeply grateful to you. Wouldn't that make you feel really good? The only thing that could louse that up is if he or she said, oh, by the way, Mom and Dad, it's a Saturday night. Could I use the car and have $100 for my date? You know, that would make you feel, whoops, that's not as deep and sincere as true as it should be. The prayer of gratitude is incredibly powerful. Don't forget it. Now we look at prayer as being communication with the absolute, communication with the cause, with the Creator, with God. We look at prayer as being positive. We look at prayer as being focused and loving and having a benevolent intention, something good at the end of it. In 1993, David Eisenberg released a study. He did a study on the opinion of the American people on practically anything you can imagine. And as far as prayer goes, through this survey, he discovered that 90% of the people in the United States pray. That 95% of those say that they've had their prayers answered. 25% have prayed for a sporting event. I wonder why. I have my own theory. My theory is that those people had money bet on a sporting event, and they wanted to pray for the outcome in their favor. 5% admit to having prayed for harm to come to another. Now let me tell you, these guys need our prayers starting right now. 25% have prayed for a medical condition to get better. Studies show that spiritual faith and practice have positive effects on the following problems. Now, I don't want you to go out of this room and say that I said that these are the only things that prayer affects. These are the things that we have studies on that I can share with you. One is cardiovascular disease. Another is post-surgical recovery. Another is stroke, hypertension, which is high blood pressure, cancer, AIDS and HIV, colitis, alcoholism, smoking, and depression. All of these conditions have shown to be helped by what we want to call prayer or focused mental energy. When people get together and focus their energy and ask the divine to participate in that action, there are certain positive things that occur. And I'm going to share some of these things with you in just a few minutes. Here are some theories about prayer. One of the theories about prayer is that in order for prayer to be effective, you got to practice certain austerities, certain things you got to do. Perhaps dietary restrictions, perhaps burning incense or lighting candles or fasting for 3 days before you pray or saying prayers day after day after day after day at the same time. That's something that probably has the capability of enhancing your prayer life if that turns you on and you're into that. Certainly can't hurt it, but it's up to you to decide if that's the way for you to pray or not. Another theory is that we need access to social support. That probably means that we need to do it together. We need to have people around us when we go through this process of prayer. And I think that's wonderful. The more the better. But it doesn't mean you can't tune in alone. It doesn't mean you can't open your heart and your mind and your needs and your wants when you're alone. Another is that emotions are released during prayer that may positively impact the immune and the cardiovascular system. That's very powerful. And another is that being the object of prayer or healing may stimulate an endocrine or immune response. Let's take a look at some scientific studies on prayer. The purpose of this slide is to remind us to get out of the box. You know, if we walk out of a building at night and we look up into stars in heaven and we're able to count 50 or 60 stars, we have an app to say now because, you know, we don't have a great clarity of the sky at night. So we may be apt to say, wow, the stars are out. We count them. There's 57 stars out tonight. That's wonderful. Well, I once read that there were 300 billion stars, planets, satellites, whatever you want to call them. That's absolutely phenomenal. And if we could see half of them, there would probably be very, very little black space in between. So we need to understand crawling out of the box and looking at what's behind the atmosphere is very important for us. This gentleman is Dr. Larry Dossey. Dr. Dossi was a conventional physician who was practicing medicine, doing a great job, and he found over a period of time many of his patients were changing. They were becoming happier. They were becoming able to deal with the conflicts and the problems and the challenges of life in a much more efficient manner. Their bodies were healing, some of them dramatically. Their relationships were getting better. Their lives were just improving at a very incredible rate. And he wanted to find out what was going on. So he did his own little survey of patients and eventually found out that most of these patients who were exhibiting very positive levels of improvement were involved in some kind of prayer work. They were committed to reading the Bible more often, going to Bible study, going to prayer groups. If they were Catholic, going to masses, healing masses, going to blessings. If they were Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, whatever, being anointed, having the laying on of hands, committing themselves to regular time of prayer. So eventually it caused a drastic change in Dr. Dossi's life. And he has become the #1 spokesman in the United States and other parts of the world for spiritual healing. This is one of his books, Healing Words, very good book. Oprah liked it, made it part of her book club. Be Careful What You Pray For is another, and it's very, very powerful. Dr. Dossi has become the most quoted physician in terms of this subject. And this quote I like as we begin this part of our presentation. The most practical reason to examine prayer and healing is simply that at least some of the time it works. The evidence is simply overwhelming that prayer functions at a distance to change physical processes in a variety of organisms from bacteria to humans. These data are so impressive that I have come to regard them as among the best kept secrets in medical science. Profound. This is coming from a medical doctor. Let's take a look at the positive therapeutic effects of intercessory prayer in a coronary care unit population. Remember, coronary patients are heart patients. This study took place over a 10-month period of time. It was at San Francisco General Hospital in the CCU unit. That is the cardiac care unit. Cardiac care unit is like intensive care unit, but specifically for heart patients. There were 393 patients involved. 192 were put in the prayed for group, and 201 in the usual care, or what we call the control group. Remember, in medicine, if we have a study that is to be respected by the profession, it must be a prospective, randomized, double-blind study. We have to have the people who are really getting the real thing. If it's a drug, they're getting the real drug that we're testing, and a group, almost half, it's usually divided in almost half or exactly half. Another group getting something that is not a medication. It's a placebo. It's a sugar pill or a water pill or some kind of nothing pill. And in doing this study with prayer, we have to do the same thing. We have to divide the group. Half of the group, or about half of the group, is in the prayed for group. The other is the control group. Nobody knows who's getting the drug or who's not. Nobody knows who's being prayed for or who's not. The results of this study: the prayed for patients were 5 times less likely to require antibiotics. Now that is a very good thing. That means they were 5 times less likely to get infections. And many infections are received at the hospital. So if you really wanted to get infection, maybe the best place to do it would be a hospital. They were 3 times less likely to develop pulmonary edema. So having less fluid in your lungs, or having 3 times less patients developing fluid in their lungs, is a magnificent thing. It's wonderful. None of them required intubation. They didn't have to have things sucked out. That's a good thing in itself. 12 in the control group, or the non-prayed for group, had to have that process. And fewer patients in the prayed for group died. This is a randomized double-blind study of the effect of distant healing in a population with advanced AIDS. AIDS is a vicious disease. It attacks the very defense center of the body. In this study, which included 40 patients with advanced last-stage AIDS, 10 weeks of distant healing were involved, which included prayer. The healers, or those who prayed, represented every different religious denomination you can imagine, including some Zoroastrians, which is a very, very ancient form of religion. Jewish brothers and sisters, Christian brothers and sisters from every denomination you can imagine in the United States, and a lot of very interesting ones that we've never heard of. The patients and the prayers and healers never met one another. The results of that study, the prayed for patients had fewer AIDS-defining illnesses. These range from about 21 to 23% in all these categories. If they did get an AIDS-defining illness, they had much lower severity. They had fewer doctor's visits in the range of about 22%, fewer hospitalizations, and improved mood. Well, of course, if the above occur, the mood is going to be better. Now, what do these look like? Well, let me tell you, if you are my age and you came over on the ark with Noah, you might recall these as reminding you of something in the theaters we used to get called Good and Plenty. Good and Plenty was a candy that looked pretty much like this. But this is not Good and Plenty. This is a bacteria in the colon, or the sewer, if you will, of the body of animals and humans. It's called E. coli. And a study was done with E. coli in petri dishes. 200 petri dishes were prepared to receive E. coli bacteria. The agar was melted, poured in, hardened, allowed to harden. That's the media that they put the bacteria on. The bacteria was placed on each and every petri dish. A lid was closed, used to close the petri dish. Remember what a petri dish is? It's one of those little Pyrex dishes you use in the labs from science, probably for most of you years ago. And after the E. coli bacteria was placed in the petri dishes, 200 of them were separated. 100 of them put on one side of the lab, 100 of them put on the other side of the lab. Two groups who were praying over the petri dishes for two purposes. On one side, they're praying and they're putting out mental energy so that the E. coli bacteria will die, will not replicate, will not grow. And on the other side, they're praying for it to thrive and to grow and to replicate. So you have on one side of the room people standing around the lab table praying for, or over 100 petri dishes, grow, grow, live, multiply. And on the other side of the coin, die, don't grow, don't multiply. Well, you know what? Both sides worked. Both. The experiment was to determine whether the growth rate of E. coli could be influenced by mental intent over a 24-hour period. The results? The subjects indeed demonstrated that they could both stimulate and inhibit the growth of the bacteria. Isn't that incredible? Didn't care, you know. It responded to both sides. Mushroom. This is a picture of a form of mushroom. Mushroom is a fungus. If we were going out to dinner tonight in Italy and we wanted mushroom, we'd order fungi. We'd say it like it is, fungus. And they'd say, oh, you want some olive oil or you want garlic or what do you want on it? We'd tell them, they'd bring it to us. If we all gathered together tonight and went out to some elegant restaurant here in town and asked for fungus, they'd look at us like we were half nuts. Fungus is a very, very interesting thing. It can be very positive. It can stimulate the immune system. Forms of it are very medicinal and very healing. Other forms are extremely poisonous. So this particular experiment regarding fungus